The folded piece of yellowed paper slipped from a silver envelope and drifted onto the polished ballroom floor just as the principal announced the most successful graduate of the last 20 years. Hundreds of former classmates turned to watch, expecting another award, another speech, another celebration. Instead, a woman with trembling hands bent down, picked up the faded paper, walked straight toward the stage, and quietly asked the one question that froze every smile in the room. She held up an old marriage pact signed when they were 17 and whispered, "Is it too late?" In that single moment, laughter disappeared, forgotten memories returned, and two lives that had been traveling in opposite directions suddenly stood face to face with the future they had once promised each other. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing stories that remind us love is never measured by perfect timing. The annual anniversary gala at Ashbrook Academy had always been more than a reunion. It was a celebration of every dream that had begun in those brick hallways filled with lockers, laughter, heartbreak, and impossible ambitions. This year marked the school's 75th anniversary, and graduates from every generation filled the sunlit auditorium decorated with white flowers, blue ribbons, and walls covered in photographs stretching back decades. Bright afternoon light poured through enormous windows, making everything feel warmer than memory itself. Among the guests was Rowan Mercer, a respected architect whose designs had transformed neighborhoods across the country. Newspapers called him a visionary, magazines praised his work, and young professionals admired his discipline. Yet the success that everyone saw had quietly grown around a lonely center. Rowan never married. Whenever reporters asked whether he regretted sacrificing family for career, he simply smiled and changed the subject. The truth remained hidden inside an old wooden box in his study where a single folded piece of paper had rested for 26 years. Across the auditorium stood Celeste Harrington, arriving several minutes late with careful steps that betrayed both confidence and uncertainty. Time had softened neither her elegance nor the sadness in her eyes. She had once dreamed of becoming a concert violinist before life carried her down unexpected roads. Marriage had come too quickly, disappointment even faster, and after years spent caring for a husband whose addictions slowly destroyed their family, she eventually found herself alone. She rebuilt her life as a music teacher, discovering that healing others sometimes made it easier to survive her own pain. Still, one unanswered question had remained buried beneath every ordinary day. They had met during their first week at Ashbrook Academy when Rowan accidentally spilled blue paint across Celeste's art portfolio. Instead of becoming angry, she laughed until tears filled her eyes because the spilled paint somehow improved the unfinished painting inside. From that ridiculous beginning grew a friendship that slowly became the quiet kind of love neither of them fully understood. They studied together beneath the oldest oak tree on campus, encouraged each other's impossible dreams, and promised never to become strangers regardless of where life carried them. On the final afternoon before graduation, they wrote a playful agreement on notebook paper. If neither of them had found lasting happiness by the time the school celebrated its 75th anniversary, they would meet again, read the note together, and decide whether destiny deserved one final chance. They both signed it with dramatic seriousness while laughing at how impossible such an idea seemed. Friends teased them endlessly, convinced they would marry long before then. Life, however, rarely honors youthful certainty. Only weeks after graduation, Celeste received an acceptance letter to a prestigious conservatory overseas. Rowan earned a scholarship to study architecture on the opposite side of the country. Distance stretched across their lives almost overnight. At first letters arrived every week. Then every month. Eventually they became holiday cards filled with polite updates instead of vulnerable truths. Neither admitted how much they missed the other because both feared becoming a burden to dreams that seemed too important to interrupt. Years later Rowan finally gathered enough courage to travel across 3 states intending to ask Celeste not whether she remembered the old pact, but whether she wanted to forget it and build something real together. When he reached the address she had once written in a Christmas card, he found moving trucks outside. A neighbor mentioned she had married recently and moved away. Rowan congratulated a woman he had never met, returned to his car, and drove home believing he had arrived years too late. What Rowan never discovered was that Celeste had never received the letter announcing his visit. It had been mailed to an apartment she had already left after accepting temporary work elsewhere. She eventually married a charming businessman who promised stability after years of uncertainty. Only after the wedding did she realize kindness and charm were not always the same thing. The marriage slowly became a prison built from broken promises, financial hardship, and emotional exhaustion. Leaving required every ounce of courage she possessed. Throughout those difficult years, she occasionally unfolded the old marriage pact. The paper had become fragile, but the ink remained surprisingly clear. She wondered whether Rowan had forgotten it long ago or whether somewhere he still remembered two teenagers foolish enough to believe the future could be scheduled decades in advance. When the invitation to the anniversary gala arrived, Celeste almost threw it away. She assumed Rowan would never attend. Successful people rarely returned to revisit old classrooms. But something inside her refused to let the opportunity disappear. She placed the invitation beside the faded agreement and decided that even unanswered questions deserved honest endings. Rowan spent most of the afternoon greeting former teachers and classmates. Everyone admired his accomplishments. Former classmates joked about old memories while teachers proudly introduced him to current students. Yet with every smile, Rowan felt strangely disconnected. Success sounded impressive when others described it, but standing once again inside the school where every dream had begun reminded him that some achievements could never replace certain losses. During the ceremony, the principal invited Rowan to the stage for a Lifetime Achievement Award. He thanked mentors who had believed in him and encouraged students never to stop building hopeful futures. His speech was sincere, thoughtful, and warmly received. Applause echoed through the auditorium. Then the silver envelope slipped from Celeste's hands. The old marriage pact floated gently onto the polished floor. Every heartbeat inside Rowan seemed to stop. He recognized the faded handwriting before she even reached the stage. Time disappeared. The applause faded into silence. When Celeste quietly asked whether it was too late, there was no accusation in her voice, no expectation, and no demand. There was only vulnerability carried across 26 years. Rowan looked at the fragile paper before lifting his eyes toward the woman who had once believed spilled paint could improve unfinished art. He realized she carried the same gentle strength that had first captured his heart as a teenager. Age had changed their faces, their careers, and their lives, but it had not erased the kindness that first brought them together. He admitted before everyone that he had kept his own copy hidden all these years. Several classmates gasped softly, remembering the joke they had once considered childish. Suddenly it no longer seemed childish at all. It seemed heartbreakingly human. The principal quietly stepped away from the microphone, sensing that the ceremony had become something far more meaningful than awards. Rowan explained how he had tried to find her decades earlier, believing she had chosen another life. Celeste shared how a missing letter and unexpected circumstances had changed everything. Neither blamed the other. Both recognized that life sometimes builds walls from simple misunderstandings rather than cruel intentions. Many guests wiped tears from their eyes as old classmates realized how close two people had come to sharing an entirely different future. After the ceremony ended, the afternoon reception continued outside beneath bright summer sunshine. Guests wandered through the gardens while a student orchestra performed gentle melodies. Rowan and Celeste walked slowly among blooming roses, speaking not about regret but about everything life had taught them separately. Rowan admitted that designing beautiful buildings had never filled the empty space reserved for genuine companionship. Celeste confessed that surviving disappointment had taught her forgiveness before happiness. Neither pretended the lost years could be recovered. They accepted that some chapters could never be rewritten. Yet they also understood that unfinished stories did not always require perfect beginnings. They visited the old oak tree where they had once studied together. Though larger now, it still stretched its branches across the familiar courtyard. Someone had placed a commemorative bench nearby honoring generations of students who discovered lifelong friendships beneath its shade. Rowan unfolded his carefully preserved copy of the marriage pact. The paper had yellowed differently from hers, yet both signatures remained visible. Looking at the two matching promises felt almost unbelievable after so many years apart. Instead of focusing on the years they had lost, Rowan suggested they begin with something much smaller than forever. He asked whether she would like to share lunch after the reunion ended. No grand speeches. No dramatic proposals. Just two old friends finally keeping a promise to meet again. Celeste smiled with tears glistening in the afternoon sunlight because sometimes the simplest invitation carries the greatest hope. They spent hours talking as though decades had quietly dissolved. They laughed about awkward school dances, impossible exams, embarrassing hairstyles, inspiring teachers, and dreams that had changed shape without completely disappearing. They also shared grief honestly, understanding that true love is not built by pretending pain never existed but by trusting someone enough to reveal it. Former classmates watched them from a respectful distance, quietly celebrating a reunion no one had expected. Several admitted later that witnessing those two reconnect reminded them to call forgotten friends, forgive old misunderstandings, and cherish relationships before time carried them too far apart. Before leaving the campus, Rowan carefully framed both copies of the marriage pact inside a transparent folder provided by the school's history committee. Rather than hiding them away again, he donated the originals to the Academy's alumni archive with a handwritten note explaining that promises are valuable not because they guarantee perfect endings but because they remind us never to stop believing people can find their way back to each other. Years afterward, new students would occasionally read that anonymous note while touring the alumni exhibit. Many smiled at the unusual story. Some laughed. Others quietly reflected on the importance of honesty, patience, and courage. Few realized the couple who sometimes volunteered together at school events were the very people behind the faded agreement. Before this story ends, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever reunited with someone who changed your life, or do you believe that some people are simply meant to find each other again despite the passing years? Leave a meaningful comment below and share the lesson this story reminded you of. Several months after the anniversary gala, the same school hosted a daytime community fundraiser in the beautiful courtyard where Rowan and Celeste had first become friends. This time they stood together, not as teenagers making impossible promises, but as two people who had survived enough heartache to understand the true value of ordinary moments. They did not celebrate the years they had lost. They celebrated the years they still had. Their story became proof that while time cannot erase every regret, it can still open doors that seemed permanently closed. Sometimes love does not arrive early. Sometimes it waits patiently until two hearts have grown strong enough to recognize that the greatest second chance is not recovering yesterday but embracing today with gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. May we all remember that the promises worth keeping are not always the ones fulfilled on time, but the ones that inspire us to believe that hope, kindness, and love can still find us when we least expect them.